Ann Morten, the Pacific Stream Keepers Federation. You have 10 minutes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and honourable members of the Standing Committee, and thank you for the opportunity to present on the review of the Fisheries Act on behalf of the Stream Keepers Federation. My name is Ann Morten, and I'm the Executive Director of the Pacific Stream Keepers Federation. I'm lucky to work with the thousands of volunteers who are dedicated to the protection and preservation of our local waterways and who work with DFO's Salmonid Enhancement Program and the Stream Keepers Program. I also volunteer with these initiatives, Salmonid Enhancement since 1988, and with the Stream Keepers since 1993. I am the product of the Senior LeBlanc's initiatives in 1977. We would like to see a stated purpose for the Fisheries Act. Without this, it's hard to stay grounded as you read the sections and subsections of the Act. A simple statement such as, "This Act is to protect our fisheries, fish and fish habitat for generations to come," would help. Changes to the Fisheries Act and the resulting changes to supportive policy and programming have caused concern for the protection of fish and fish habitat within the Pacific region. Let's put in place an Act that will service us for the next 40 years, and let's start with the changes to the Act that hold promise, areas to keep, as you begin to draft this new Act. The conditions of authorizations that are enforceable. This premise should make it easier to know where there has been non-compliance, as the steps are clearly written out and what was needed to be done, and indeed what was done. We recommend that these conditions be extended to policy, such as the previously written operating statements, with the addition of a need to notify as to works being done. This could be a strong and useful tool for monitoring works and compliance of conditions. The Minister's decision. Minister needs to be able to make those tough decisions, but the process needs to be open and transparent with clear language as to who, when, where, how, and why would the Minister authorize an undertaking that would compromise our fish and fish habitat. We would like the assurance that the project itself is reviewed and that this tool be used sparingly. Like water, people too take the path of least resistance. Let's not use this tool without strong reasoning. We recommend that Minister have the ability to make the tough choices with the expanded need to take into account the actual undertaking as well as a public record of Minister's authorizations. The parliamentary report could accommodate this. Minister's ability to do programming. The Recreational Fisheries Conservation Protection Program is being used as an example. And BC gained on this, as we have Department of Fisheries and Oceans, community advisors, restoration biologists, technical help, and engineers who have built a strong stewardship community who have the capacity to engage in this granting process. Restoration works require a long-term commitment relationship between the proponent, property owner, and the agency. We recommend that programs such as this come with a percentage of the budget being made available to government programming so that government can engage more fully. The provision of equivalency. While we feel that DFO, through the federal government, has the authority, responsibility, and are accountable to protect our Canadian resource, there are examples of partnership and shared responsibilities that work to empower others where it makes sense, to manage the landscape in support of the purpose of the Fisheries Act. Monitoring of the standards and of the on-the-ground outcomes is vital to ensuring that working relationships, shared goals and outcomes are able to withstand the test of implementation of the policy papers. Are DFO goals being met for the protection of fish and fish habitat? DFO will need personnel to work with their partners to ensure that this is not a transfer of work, not a download, but a sharing of policies, resources, tools, and ideals to fulfill the mandates that all partners have. Through this, we will need strong, defensible, enforced Fisheries Act, as the others are only able to take their own bylaws and regulations to court. And we still need and look for strong leadership from our federal government. So we recommend the continued ability to share the responsibility for fish and fish habitat where other jurisdictions meet or beat the federal standard, while ensuring the federal standard is comprehensive, strong, and adaptable to the diversity of fish and fish habitat across our country. We also support the ability to pull out of these agreements where the partner is not able to meet or beat the standard set out by the Fisheries Act and supportive policy. A few comments and recommendations from community to bring into a present, strong, enforceable Fisheries Act. We are looking to have the harmful alteration, harmful disruption, and harmful destruction put back into the Act. As we know and have heard again in these proceedings, fish do not always die right away after having an encounter with humans. I'm envisioning an incident wherein within a Chinook rearing habitat and trying to make the case that there was serious harm done to fish or to the recreational fishery. This is an animal that lives in fresh water for a portion of their lives, then heads out to the ocean, returning to spawn anywhere between 3 and 5 years later. One would have a hard time saying that the returns were diminished by an incident. Under the new Act, DFO's involvement only comes in when there needs to be an authorization to do serious harm to fish. They are not notified of the multitude of changes taking place in and around our waterways on a regular basis. There was a time that the department was there to assist people, to help them not cause a HAD, to work them towards mitigation works, to help them determine good compensation plans, to share their knowledge of local waterways. But as Canada grew, this task became too great, and streamlining processes were developed. We've heard of the hardship for farmers wanting to clean drainage ditches. There were municipalities wanting to do this as well. When the department reviewed the most common requests for authorizations around 2006, it became very clear that the majority of their time was spent on about 13 different activities being done routinely across the country. This is where the operating statements were written with clear guidance as to how to undertake these tasks so as not to cause a HAD. And I know it's hard to hear, but I'm using the HAD with 2 Ds, not one. A piece we found lacking in these was there was no need to notify DFO when works were being done. This made it very difficult to monitor to ensure that the steps put forward were indeed being followed and that they were working. These operating statements were removed when the new Act came into place and were replaced by the Working in and Around Waters, an online tool to help guide citizens to know if they need an authorization. But these are through the lens of causing serious harm to fish in the CRA. Section 2.1 of the Act speaks to habitat, but this gets lost in the instruction that says, with Section 35 being the main habitat protection provision against carrying out projects causing serious harm to fish. There's limiting words in that. With studies showing that over half the developers in North Vancouver did not know that their storm drains on the street was carrying the development waste directly to the local streams, I find it hard to imagine that the average person could self-determine if they might cause serious harm to the fish or to a fishery, whether it be local or at sea. Using the Minister's regulation-making powers for compliance, we would like to see the past self-assessment tools be reviewed with the HAD in place of serious harm and the addition of a modern update. Proponents can check the boxes to indicate that they have read and understood the questions on the form, and when they are finished, they submit it. 1 copy goes to themselves, so they know they have gone through the process, and 1 copy goes to DFO. The form would act as a notification to department that an activity was taking place. GPS coordinates would generate a map to indicate where certain activities are occurring regularly, and this would help form a work plan for monitoring. How can we expect compliance if the authorities don't even know any changes are occurring in our watersheds? So we recommend the legal requirement for notifications and the ability to easily see where works are occurring for planned monitoring of authorized and non-authorized works. Bringing back the former Section 35, the HAD, would bring with it the precedents from past court cases, building on a foundation. Policy that supported the previous Section 35 had as its objectives the net gain of habitat for Canada's fishing resources. I want to mention again that DFO staff were also there to help people to prevent causing a HAD. How to stay on the right side of the Fisheries Act. They were there to provide local knowledge to municipalities, to participate in decision-making, assist with meaningful mitigation or compensation plans. Granted, there was some headbutting. But by having strong regulations and knowledgeable people and the occasional pot of money for restoration works, people came together to find solutions to work on mutually beneficial projects. Agriculture areas found ways to work with their channelized waterways to accommodate fish populations while protecting their stream banks from erosion. This is a win-win for farmers and fish, but it takes partnerships and the long-term commitment by the agencies and the landowner. Restoring a stream is not cheap. Proactive protection is the preferred pathway. Canada is the second largest country in the world, with the second largest amount of fresh water. We would be expected to have strong, enforceable protection measures. The purpose of the Fisheries Act is not to stop development. It is to set conditions under which the development can occur, but it is to have a focus on the protection of our fish and our fisheries. We look forward to reading your recommendations and continue to work with government under the new Fisheries Act. We also look forward to the reestablishment of the Habitat Management Program to administer habitat protection provisions under this new act. Thank you.
That was absolutely perfect. 10 minutes on the nose. Thank you very much. Okay, now we're going to start our first round of questions.
I'll keep this succinct. Depends on what the function of the water was prior to man taking account. If it's a dugout and it's not attached to anything, it's just full of water, well, of course, that wouldn't be anything to do with the Fisheries Act. But if you've actually channelized a functioning stream and turned it into an irrigation ditch or a drainage ditch, that would, of course, need to be covered under the Fisheries Act. You think of the man-made end of things as well. I have to say person-made because I actually made a fish-bearing stream. And yes, I would like to have it have the protection of the Fisheries Act. We changed a leachate ditch in the district of North Vancouver from a drainage ditch that took the leachates to Lynn Creek into a fish-bearing stream, and I would like to have that under protected. That was the intent of it.
And on the definition of fish or fishery, because this has come up a lot, is the ambiguity in what we're told is the harm where you would be charged. Is it the death of one fish or multiple?
Very, very tricky. And it's funny that you should say that because I actually asked that question. When I found out about the duty to report, I was at a meeting and I was a bit terrified because the day before I had killed a fish. We were digging out our man-made structure that is designed for fish. We had done all the trapping. We had done everything we could to remove the fish. What on earth a chum salmon was doing there in the middle of summer, I have no idea. But anyhow, we took this fish and it went in the back of the dump truck. And I didn't know about the duty to report. So I was with Fisheries and I said, oh, I will report that then. And then they said, well, are you sure it died? And I said, yes. I dug it out. I put it in the back of a dump truck. I dumped it in a landfill. I'm sure it's dead. I'm sure of it. I still don't know what it was doing there. And they suggested, they said, well, is it one fish? And I said, yes. And they said, oh, don't worry about one fish. And I said, well, what if it was two? Do I worry about two? What if it was three? What is that magic number? And there wasn't one. And that was the trick. There wasn't one. Because these were actually hatchery fish. I run a small enhancement facility, and it was a hatchery fish. And, we already had bumped the numbers up a bit. So where does that come into play? The definition of fish and fish habitat and harm to that is much easier.
So should that be something the committee be looking at? Or is in this recommendation?
Well, you can look at it. I don't know if you'll find an answer, but you can look at it.
How much time do I have?
Ms. Morten, if I could change to you to ask about, I think everybody has provided very good testimony, by the way, very helpful and heard the recommendations. One additional issue that has come up that is cumulative impacts for streams and watersheds. And also the wild salmon policy as it relates, and we heard about the importance of regulations and not having them. Could you comment either on or both on cumulative impacts and how that's tied to the Fisheries Act and or the wild salmon policy? Cumulative impacts is a hard one to do when you don't know what's going on in the area. One of the things that they talk about, what changed in things, is we had a harmful alteration in my mind, in that fisheries used to be with our municipality to work on different projects. I was counting fish one day and came around the corner and found an excavator in the creek digging out the gravel. I was counting salmon. They were excavating gravel. It's a timing issue. Those kind of cumulative effects would not even be known had I not been out walking with my friends counting salmon that day. We wouldn't have known that was going on. With the wild salmon policy... Sorry, if I could just add, that's probably enforcement and having enough resources for the department to be able to monitor what's going on.
Well, if it's not going to cause serious harm to fish, it's hard to say that it needs to be enforced.
Right,
it was a timing issue with the municipality no longer working with department to realize there was pink salmon in the channel at that time. And it was just a timing issue. They wanted to wait till children went back to school rather than pay attention to the Fisheries Act. Right. It's a bit of a difference. So if you don't know when these things are happening, it's hard to determine cumulative effects, but we do see the effects on the waterways and on the fisheries as we count fish coming back, but also on the water and the levels that they're going up and down. Sorry. And the other one, wild salmon policy, is up for review, and it is just going through the process now. So the department is going around the province asking about the renewal to the wild salmon policy and where it fits in with the new Fisheries Act.
Ms. Morten, one of the things that's come up any number of times is we've been looking for specific examples where the changes to the Fisheries Act actually resulted in something unfortunate taking place. Do you have, you just mentioned one actually a moment ago, is that the only example of something that where perhaps now we're dropping the ball?
It's very difficult to say what changes have happened in that we haven't gone through a full salmon cycle since the Act was changed, except for pink salmon. So it's very difficult to say exactly. But we had a couple of examples, and one we believe to be on the tributary to Maple Creek, where a 10,000 square foot home with a 3,000 square foot garage caused for the person who owned the property to want to move the stream to another area. And they were given an authorization to do that in order to, and it said it wouldn't cause any harm to the CRA. But nobody paid attention to the fact that they wanted to change the fish and fish habitat for a 10,000 square foot home and a 3,000 square foot garage. And those are the things I think we need to do, is look at the actual project that's compromising our fishery.
That wouldn't have happened under the old regime?
I don't believe it would. I think there would have been enough eyes and ears out there to make a difference within fisheries.
Comment briefly, if you can, on the state of the DFO. I know you've worked closely with them.
Well, I go to a retirement party about every day. People are leaving and leaving en masse. The corporate knowledge loss right now is absolutely huge. The people that came into Fisheries and Oceans Canada and are nearing the end of their careers, or at 30 years, had a passion for fish and fish habitat and for the people. And now we are losing that corporate knowledge. And it's the feeling that they're not able to protect anymore. The feeling that they can't look people like me in the eye and say we're doing the best that we can. It's making a difference.
Loss of relationships too, I suppose, between DFO and the people that they're supposed to be basically helping, advising, or overseeing.
We have the SEP community workshops coming up in Quesnel, May 19 to 21. Hopefully you can come out to that. And that's for the salmon enhancement community to come out and celebrate with Fisheries and Oceans Canada all the great things that the community has done under Minister LeBlanc and now Minister LeBlanc's oversight.
Thank you for that.
Ms. Morten, with regards to the changes that were made to the Fisheries Act in 2012, you said you've been with your organization now for quite some time. Were you asked about the changes and how they would affect your habitat, your studies, your work? Did anyone from DFO contact you and say this is what we're considering for changing in the Fisheries Act, and how will it affect you?
I think it came as a surprise to most people.
Okay, thank you.
No comment.
And the other question I had was with regards to defining and definition, because we've heard here today, serious harm to fish, and I guess that's a. How do you define that? How do you define what is serious harm? And I mean, we did have one witness who appeared earlier who said it would be like his mother would say, don't hurt your sister. Well, how do you define what that means? I guess I'd ask you, what do you see as serious harm to fish?
I think Dr. Christy Miller brought up the best points on that one about how hard that is to determine. Just having stress factors within our lives and within fisheries' lives causes them to go through a period of not being able to maybe transfer from a freshwater fish to a saltwater fish. So something like Beaver Creek in Stanley Park, the water levels there go up to 27 degrees in the summertime. Lovely to swim in, but not so good for fish. So it makes it so their internal bodies don't change over, and they have a difficult time changing. And instead of keeping salts in their body, expelling salts. They go through quite a process to go through smoltification, and it's those kind of struggles that they go through because of stressors that happen. So even something as simple as water quality changes can cause for stress that makes them unable to go to their next stage in life.
I want to thank all of our witnesses for their excellent testimony and the time that they devoted to not only preparing it, but also delivering it to us and answering the questions from the committee. This meeting is now adjourned.